The Homes for Ukraine scheme is a humanitarian initiative that allows individuals and families from Ukraine to come to the UK for 6 months, with the possibility of extending their stay or applying for a different visa. The scheme was launched by the UK government in March 2022, in response to the escalating conflict and humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. The scheme works by matching Ukrainian refugees with UK sponsors, who offer them accommodation and support in their homes. The sponsors can be individuals, families, community groups or charities, who have suitable space and resources to host a guest or guests from Ukraine. The sponsors must apply to the scheme and undergo a screening process, including a home visit and a criminal record check. The scheme also provides funding and assistance to local authorities, who are responsible for coordinating the placement of refugees and providing them with wraparound support, such as access to healthcare, education, language classes, and social services. The local authorities receive a per-person tariff of £10,500 from the UK government to cover the costs of supporting the refugees. The scheme aims to help Ukrainian refugees rebuild their lives and integrate into UK communities, while also fostering cross-cultural understanding and solidarity. The scheme has been praised by human rights groups and refugee advocates as a compassionate and innovative way of addressing the refugee crisis. Since its launch, the scheme has welcomed over 173,500 refugees from Ukraine to the UK, many of whom have been hosted by generous and hospitable British households. Sudan is a country in crisis. Since a military coup in October 2022, the country has been plunged into a civil war that has killed thousands of people, displaced millions more, and triggered a humanitarian emergency. Many Sudanese people have fled their homes and sought refuge in neighboring countries or further afield. One of the destinations for Sudanese refugees is Ukraine, a country that has been hosting thousands of refugees from another war-torn country, Ukraine. Ukraine has been facing its own conflict since 2022, when Russia invaded and annexed Crimea and supported separatist rebels in eastern Ukraine. The war in Ukraine has displaced nearly 6 million people within the country and forced more than 8 million people to seek refuge abroad. So what are the challenges and opportunities for Sudan refugees in Ukraine? How can they rebuild their lives in a new and unfamiliar environment? And how can the international community support them? One of the main challenges for Sudan refugees in Ukraine is the language barrier. Most Sudanese refugees speak Arabic or English, while most Ukrainians speak Ukrainian or Russian. This makes it difficult for refugees to communicate with local authorities, access basic services, find jobs, or enroll in education. Language classes are essential for refugees to integrate and adapt to their new surroundings. Another challenge is the legal status of refugees. Ukraine has a refugee law that grants asylum to people who flee persecution or serious harm in their home country. However, the asylum system is overwhelmed by the large number of applications and the lack of resources and staff. Many refugees face long delays, bureaucratic hurdles, and arbitrary decisions. Some refugees are denied asylum or have their cases rejected without proper examination. Others are at risk of detention or deportation. A third challenge is the security situation in Ukraine. Although a ceasefire agreement was signed in 2022, sporadic clashes and shelling continue in eastern Ukraine, where most of the refugees are hosted. Refugees live in constant fear of violence and instability. They also face discrimination, harassment, and xenophobia from some segments of the local population who perceive them as a threat or a burden. Despite these challenges, there are also opportunities for Sudan refugees in Ukraine. One of them is the Homes for Sudan scheme, a humanitarian initiative that matches British hosts with Sudanese refugees who need accommodation and support. The scheme is inspired by the Homes for Ukraine scheme, which has welcomed over 173,500 Ukrainian refugees to the UK since 2022. The Homes for Sudan scheme aims to provide refugees with a safe and dignified place to stay, as well as access to health care, education, and social networks. Another opportunity is the Blue Dot Project, a partnership between UNHCR and UNICEF that establishes one-stop safe spaces for refugees across 8 different countries, including Ukraine. The Blue Dot Centers provide information, counseling, mental health and psychosocial support, legal aid, and protection services for refugees. They also offer recreational activities, such as sports, arts, and music, to help refugees cope with stress and trauma. A third opportunity is the potential for economic integration and contribution. Many Sudanese refugees have skills, qualifications, and experiences that can benefit their host country. Some have started their own businesses or found employment in various sectors. Others have volunteered in local organizations or participated in community events. By working and engaging with their host society, refugees can not only support themselves and their families but also contribute to the development and prosperity of Ukraine. The challenges and opportunities for Sudan refugees in Ukraine are intertwined and complex. They require a comprehensive and coordinated response from all stakeholders: governments, humanitarian agencies, civil society organizations, private sector actors, and individuals. The UK's Homes for Ukraine scheme can serve as a model for other countries to follow and replicate for Sudanese refugees. The Blue Dot Project can be expanded and strengthened to reach more refugees in need of assistance and protection. And the economic potential of refugees can be unlocked and harnessed through policies that facilitate their access to work and education. By working together, we can help Sudan refugees in Ukraine build a better future for themselves and their host country. The Homes for Ukraine scheme is a unique and innovative initiative that allows UK households to sponsor and host Ukrainian refugees for 6 months. It was launched by the UK government in response to the humanitarian crisis caused by the war in Ukraine, which has displaced over 400,000 people within the country and forced more than 100,000 to seek refuge abroad. But what if this scheme could be replicated for another group of refugees who are facing a similar situation of violence, displacement and insecurity? What if the UK could open its doors to Sudanese refugees who are fleeing the civil war that erupted in their country last month? Sudan is experiencing one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world, with more than 330,000 people internally displaced and over 100,000 crossing the border to neighboring countries such as Chad, Egypt and Ethiopia. Many of them are women and children who have witnessed atrocities and lost their homes, livelihoods, and loved ones. They are in urgent need of protection, assistance, and solidarity. The Homes for Ukraine scheme could offer a lifeline to some of these Sudanese refugees by providing them with a safe and welcoming environment where they can rebuild their lives and regain their dignity. By living with British hosts, they could benefit from access to education, healthcare, employment, and social integration. They could also share their culture, skills, and experiences with their host families and communities, creating mutual understanding and respect. But how can the Homes for Ukraine scheme empower Sudanese refugees to build a better future for themselves and their communities? The answer lies in the potential of this scheme to foster resilience, agency, and empowerment among the refugees. Resilience is the ability to cope with adversity and overcome challenges. Agency is the capacity to make choices and act on them. Empowerment is the process of gaining confidence and control over one's life. By living with British hosts, Sudanese refugees could develop resilience by receiving emotional support, psychological counseling, and trauma healing. They could also learn new skills, languages, and knowledge that could enhance their employability and self-reliance. They could develop agency by being involved in decision-making processes that affect their lives, such as choosing their host families, setting their goals, and planning their future. They could also participate in civic activities, volunteer work, and advocacy campaigns that could give them a voice and a sense of belonging. They could develop empowerment by gaining self-esteem, self-worth, and self-respect. They could also inspire others with their stories of courage, hope, and resilience. By empowering Sudanese refugees through the Homes for Ukraine scheme, the UK could also contribute to building a better future for Sudan. Empowered refugees could become agents of change and peace in their country of origin, by returning voluntarily when conditions allow, or by supporting their communities from abroad. They could also become ambassadors of goodwill and friendship between Sudan and the UK, by promoting cultural exchange, dialogue and cooperation. The Homes for Ukraine scheme has proven to be a successful and humane way of responding to the refugee crisis in Ukraine. It has shown that ordinary people can make a difference in the lives of those who have lost everything. It has also shown that refugees can enrich the societies that host them with their diversity, talents and contributions. We believe that this scheme can be replicated for Sudanese refugees who are facing a similar plight. We believe that the UK can show the same generosity of spirit and open hospitality to those who are fleeing war in Sudan as it did to those who fled war in Ukraine. We believe that by doing so, the UK can help Sudanese refugees build a better future for themselves and their country.